Mom laughed in front of the whole family, asking how it feels to be useless daughter. I looked at her calmly and said it feels great actually since I just stopped paying your rent. Her smile vanished instantly. My dad froze his fork, hovering halfway to his mouth, then shouted, "What rent, why?" What they did not know was that the luxury life they were flaunting was funded entirely by the daughter they despised. Before I tell you how I evicted my own parents from the mansion I paid for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the family bank, but treated like the family burden. My name is Keisha, and I am 32 years old, living in Atlanta. To the outside world, and specifically to my family, I am a low-level data entry clerk struggling to make ends meet. They think I live in a cramped apartment and drive a beat-up sedan because that is all I can afford. But the truth is much different. I am a senior forensic accountant and the owner of a private financial consulting firm. I hunt down hidden assets for divorce lawyers and the federal government. My net worth sits comfortably in the millions, but I learned a long time ago that in my family, money does not buy love, it only buys abuse. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be the breaking point. I just did not know it yet. I pulled my modest Toyota Camry into the driveway of the 5-bedroom colonial-style house in Buckhead. It was a beautiful home with manicured lawns and a grand entrance. A home that cost $4,500 a month to maintain. A home that my parents lived in like royalty, while treating me like the help. I took a deep breath, grabbing the bottle of wine from the passenger seat. It was a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon priced at $200 a bottle. I had removed the price tag, but left the vintage label hoping maybe, just maybe, my mother Louise would appreciate the quality. The moment I stepped through the double oak doors, the noise hit me. My mother had invited everyone. The pastor from her church, her bridge club friends, and half the neighborhood. She loved an audience. She loved showing off the success she claimed was hers. "Keisha, you are late," my mother snapped from the hallway. She was wearing a silk dress that I knew cost $600 because I had seen the charge on the credit card I paid off last month. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in that familiar expression of disappointment. "And look at what you are wearing. Do you not have anything that does not look like it came from a discount bin?" I was wearing a simple black dress, but it was tailored and made of high-quality wool. To my mother, if it did not have a flashy logo, it was trash. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," I said, holding out the wine. "I brought this for dinner." She took the bottle, barely glancing at it, and shoved it into the hands of a passing waiter she had hired for the night. "Put that on the back table with the cheap stuff," she instructed him loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. "We will save the good wine for the toast for Jamal." Jamal. My 36-year-old brother, the golden child, the man who had spent 3 years in federal prison for insurance fraud, but whom my mother insisted was just away on a spiritual retreat. He had been out for 2 months and was already acting like the king of Atlanta. I walked into the living room, and there he was, holding court by the fireplace. He was wearing a flashy suit that was a little too tight, laughing loudly at his own jokes. Clinging to his arm was Becky, his new fiancée. Becky was white, 30 years old, and possessed a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She worked at a high-end spa and made it very clear that she thought she was doing my family a favor by associating with us. "Oh, Keisha, you made it!" Becky chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We were just betting on whether your old car would break down on the way over. Jamal said you really need to upgrade, but I told him not everyone has his business acumen." I tightened my grip on my purse. Business acumen. Jamal had never held a legal job for more than 6 months in his life. "I am fine, Becky," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The car runs just fine." Jamal laughed, sipping his drink. "Still pushing buttons for minimum wage. Huh, little sister? You know I could probably get you a job cleaning up at the new office I am planning to open. It is going to be a nail salon empire. Big money. But you would have to dress better than that." I ignored him and made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find my father. Gerald was sitting at the breakfast nook staring at his phone. My father was a man of few words, mostly because my mother never let him get a word in edgewise. He believed he was the patriarch, the provider. He handed my mother $800 every month from his meager savings, thinking it covered the mortgage. He had no idea the mortgage was actually $4,500, and I paid the difference every single month for the past 5 years. "Hi, Dad," I said. He looked up, his eyes tired. "Keisha, your mother is in a mood today. Try not to upset her." I almost laughed. My existence upset her. Dinner was served an hour later. The dining room table was laden with turkey ham, endless sides, and crystal glasses. It was a display of excess that screamed wealth. Wealth they did not have. Wealth I provided. I sat at the far end of the table, squeezed between a distant cousin and the kitchen door, while Jamal and Becky sat at the head of the table next to my parents. Throughout the meal, the conversation revolved entirely around Jamal. My mother told stories of his brilliance, his charisma, his big plans for the future. She conveniently left out the prison time, the debts, and the fact that he was currently living in her basement, rent-free. Then came the moment that changed everything. My mother stood up, tapping her spoon against her glass. The room fell silent. She beamed, looking around at her guests, her face flushed with wine and pride. "I want to propose a toast," she announced. "To my son Jamal, my heart. He has just closed a deal that is going to put this family on the map. He is a true businessman, a leader, and the future of this family." Everyone clapped. Jamal nodded, soaking up the adoration that he had done absolutely nothing to earn. My mother turned her gaze down the table until it landed on me. Her smile twisted into something cruel. "And to Keisha," she said, her voice carrying that fake pity she had perfected. "We love you too, honey. Even if you are still finding your way. I know it must be hard sitting there watching your brother achieve so much while you are still, well, stuck." She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the silent room. "I mean, really, Keisha, 32 years old and still doing data entry. It is embarrassing, really. How does it feel to be the useless one in the family?" Becky giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, Mrs. Louise, do not be so mean. Not everyone can be smart like Jamal. Someone has to do the grunt work." The guests chuckled nervously, sensing the tension but unwilling to stop the show. My father kept his head down, focusing on his mashed potatoes. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was a sensation I knew well from my work. It was the feeling of finding the smoking gun in a stack of financial records. The moment you know you have won, and the other person just does not realize they are dead yet. I put my fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin and stood up. The room went quiet, waiting to see if I would cry or run away as I usually did. Instead, I pulled my phone out of my purse. I unlocked it and opened my banking app. "Mom, you asked me a question," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You asked how it feels to be useless." My mother rolled her eyes. "Oh, sit down, Keisha, take a joke." I looked her dead in the eye. "It feels great, Mom. It feels truly liberating. Especially since being useless means I do not have to have any responsibilities, right?" I tapped the screen on my phone. "What are you doing?" Jamal sneered. "Playing games. I am just making a small adjustment to my budget," I replied. "You see, Mom, since I am so useless and broke, I decided I can no longer afford to support this household." I pressed the confirm button on the screen. "There," I said, holding the phone up so she could see the green check mark. "I just canceled the automatic transfer." My mother frowned, confused. "What transfer? What are you talking about?" "The rent, Mom. The mortgage. The $3,700 I transferred to the shell company that pays for this house every single month on the 1st. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My father dropped his fork. My mother's face went pale, but she tried to laugh it off. "You are lying. You do not have that kind of money. You are a data entry clerk. I am a senior forensic accountant, Mom," I said, letting the truth hang there. I own a firm that audits Fortune 500 companies. I make more in a month than Jamal has made in his entire life. And for the past 5 years, I have been paying the mortgage on this house because Dad's $800 does not even cover the property taxes. My father stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. Is this true, Louise? You told me the house was paid off. You told me my contribution was for utilities and groceries. My mother stammered, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. Gerald, she is lying. She is just trying to ruin Jamal's night. I scrolled through my phone history and tapped on a transaction from last month. Then I connected my phone to the smart TV in the living room via Bluetooth. Suddenly, the giant 60-inch screen displayed my bank statement. November 1st, $3,700 paid to Atlanta Luxury Homes, LLC. October 1st, $3,700. September 1st, $3,700. The list went back years. Everyone stared at the screen. The numbers were undeniable. You see, I continued walking toward the door. I set this up to help you. I wanted you to live comfortably. I let you believe your own lies about being rich because I wanted you to be happy. But tonight you stood there and called me useless. You let your son and his girlfriend mock me while drinking the wine I bought in the house I pay for. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at my mother, who was now trembling not with remorse but with fear. So I am done. I am officially useless, which means I am of no use to you financially. I just canceled the payment for December. It is due in 5 days. Good luck paying it with Dad's $800 and Jamal's imaginary millions. Becky stood up, her face red. You cannot do that. You cannot just leave them high and dry. That is cruel. Cruel, I laughed, and it was a cold, sharp sound. Cruel is taking money from your daughter for 5 years while treating her like a parasite. Cruel is laughing at her in front of strangers. Welcome to reality, Becky. I hope Jamal's nail salon empire is ready to launch by Monday because eviction notices in Georgia come fast. I walked out of the house into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear my father shouting, my mother screaming, and the chaotic sounds of a party imploding. I got into my Toyota Camry and started the engine. As I drove away, I did not feel sad. I did not feel guilty. I felt light, but I knew this was not over. My mother was not the type to let go of her ATM machine without a fight, and Jamal was not the type to let his ego be bruised without seeking revenge. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the highway. 50 missed calls, voicemails filling up, text messages flooding in. I glanced at the screen. You ungrateful brat, come back here and fix this. That was Mom. I am going to come to your job and get you fired, you liar. That was Jamal. But then I saw a notification from my bank security app. Alert, failed login attempt. Incorrect security question answer. I smiled grimly. They were already trying to hack my accounts. They were desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. I was not just a daughter they had scorned. I was a forensic accountant. I hunted down financial fraud for a living. And my family had just volunteered to be my next case. If they thought tonight was bad, they had no idea what was coming next. Because I was not just cutting them off. I was about to audit their entire lives. Stay tuned, because the war has just begun. It took exactly 7 days for the bubble to burst. I had spent the week following Thanksgiving in a state of productive silence, working from my glass-walled office in Midtown Atlanta while my family stewed in the suburbs. I knew the first of the month was approaching like a freight train, and I had front-row seats to the collision. I had set up a notification on my burner phone, which was the only line of communication I left open for my father. I wanted to know the exact moment the illusion of his life shattered. On the morning of December 1st, the notification came through. It was not a text message, but a voicemail from my father, Gerald. His voice, usually deep and authoritative, was trembling with a mixture of confusion and rising panic. He sounded like a man who had woken up in a house that was no longer his. Keisha, he stammered into the phone. I just got off the phone with Mr. Henderson, the landlord. He says the rent is overdue. He says we owe $4,500 for this month. There must be a mistake. I sent the check for $800 last week just like I always do. He says that is not even 20% of the total. Call me back immediately. This man is threatening eviction and saying we are violating lease terms. I sat back in my leather executive chair and took a slow sip of my espresso. The math was simple, but the psychological impact was devastating. For 5 years, my father had lived in a fantasy where $800 was enough to rent a 5-bedroom colonial mansion in one of the most expensive zip codes in Georgia. He genuinely believed his contribution made him the provider, the head of the household. He had no idea that I had been quietly wiring $3,700 every single month to cover the difference. I had subsidized his ego to keep the peace, and in return, he had allowed my mother to treat me like a servant. I did not return the call. I let him sit in that discomfort. I let him walk into the kitchen and confront my mother, Louise. I could only imagine the scene, but I did not have to imagine it for long, because an hour later my father called again. This time, he was not confused. He was furious. "Keisha, pick up the phone," he shouted into the voicemail. "I just spoke to your mother. She told me everything. She told me you have been paying the difference all these years. Why did you lie to me? Why did you let me believe I was providing for this family when it was you? And where is the money I gave her? She said she used it for groceries, but the landlord says he has never seen a dime from us directly." The truth had finally come out. Under the pressure of eviction, my mother had crumbled. She had admitted that the $800 my father gave her every month never went to the rent. It went to her collection of designer purses, her weekly salon visits, and most importantly, into the pockets of my brother Jamal. She had been siphoning the household funds to support her golden child's lifestyle, while I quietly paid the bills to keep them from being homeless. By noon, the tone of the messages shifted dramatically. The shock had worn off, replaced by the toxic entitlement that ran through my family in veins like a disease. Instead of apologies or gratitude for the nearly $250,000 I had spent on them over the years, they went on the offensive. My mother left 5 voicemails in 10 minutes, each one more unhinged than the last. "You ungrateful little witch!" she screamed, her voice distorted by rage. "You think you are so smart, embarrassing us like this. Your father is having chest pains because of you. If anything happens to him, it is on your hands. You need to fix this, Keisha. Transfer the money right now. We have a reputation in this neighborhood, and I will not have the sheriff putting our furniture on the lawn because you are throwing a tantrum." She still did not get it. She thought this was a tantrum. She thought I was acting out like a rebellious teenager rather than a 32-year-old woman who had finally decided to stop financing her own abuse. Then came Jamal. His text messages were a barrage of threats and insults devoid of any self-awareness. "You think you are funny," he wrote. "Becky will not stop crying because she thinks we are going to be homeless. You better pay that rent, Keisha. You have plenty of money, you said so yourself. Stop being stingy and do your duty. I know where you live. I am coming over there to teach you some respect." I looked at the timestamp on the text. He had sent it 10 minutes ago. I knew exactly where he was going. He was heading to my old apartment, the cramped 1-bedroom unit on the outskirts of town that I kept as a decoy. For years I had let them believe I lived there in squalor while I actually resided in a penthouse. It was my safety buffer, a way to keep them from knowing my true net worth. I pulled up the security camera feed from my old apartment on my phone. Sure enough, at 12:45 in the afternoon, Jamal's flashy leased BMW screeched into the parking lot. He jumped out wearing a designer tracksuit that cost more than my first car and stormed up the stairs. My mother was right behind him, struggling to keep up in her heels, clutching her purse like a weapon. I watched in silence as Jamal pounded on the door of Unit 4B. "Open up!" he yelled loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I know you are in there, Keisha. Stop hiding like a coward." He kicked the door, leaving a black scuff mark on the cheap wood. My mother was shouting too, waving her hands in the air. "Keisha, we are your family. You cannot do this to us. You have a duty to honor your parents. Open this door and give me your credit card right now. They were making quite a scene. Neighbors were peeking out of their windows and someone was recording on their phone. I watched as the current tenant, a large man with a thick beard and a very unfriendly pit bull, opened the door. "Who are you people?" he barked, holding the dog back by its collar. My mother took a step back, clutching her pearls. "Where is Keisha?" she demanded, trying to maintain her air of superiority. "She lives here. She moved out 6 months ago," the man grunted. "Get off my porch before I let the dog loose." Jamal tried to bluster, puffing out his chest. "You are lying. She is hiding in there. Let me in to check." The man stepped forward, towering over Jamal. "Buddy, I do not know who you are, but if you do not disappear in 5 seconds, you are going to be explaining yourself to the cops." Jamal, always a coward when faced with real confrontation, backed down immediately. He muttered something under his breath and retreated to the car. My mother lingered for a moment, looking confused and lost, staring at the closed door as if she could will me to appear. Then she scurried after him, defeated. I closed the app, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. They had no idea where I really lived. My penthouse in Midtown was listed under a trust, and my office was in a secure building with biometric access. I was a ghost to them, a ghost with a bank account they could no longer drain. But their desperation was growing, and desperate people make dangerous mistakes. Around 3 in the afternoon, I received an alert from my bank. It was a high-priority security notification. Alert: multiple failed login attempts detected. Device location: Atlanta, Georgia. IP address matches a known device associated with user Louise Williams. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Of course. They were trying to hack into my checking account. My mother knew my old passwords, simple variations of childhood pets and birthdays that I used to use before I became a professional in financial security. She thought she could just log in and transfer the money herself, as if I were still the naive girl who left her laptop open on the kitchen table. I tapped the screen to view the details. They had tried my birthday, my high school mascot, even the name of my first goldfish. It was pathetic, really. But then I saw something that made me sit up straight. Attempted security question answer. What is your mother's maiden name? They were trying to reset the password. They were trying to take control of the account entirely. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was attempted fraud. I picked up my office phone and dialed the bank's fraud department. "This is Keisha Williams' account, ending in 4598. I need to report an unauthorized access attempt. Please freeze all online access immediately and require in-person verification for any withdrawals." "Done," the agent confirmed. "Would you like to flag this IP address for law enforcement?" "Not yet," I said, watching the rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. Let them keep trying. Let them dig the hole a little deeper. I hung up and looked at my burner phone. It was time to sever the last link. I changed my number one last time, sending the new digits only to my lawyer and my assistant. Then I turned off the burner phone and dropped it into the drawer of my desk. Let them scream into the void. The rent was still due. And eviction notices in Georgia, as I had warned Becky, moved very, very fast. I turned back to my work, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face, but my mind was already calculating their next move. They would not stop at hacking. They would try to find me at work. And when they did, I would be ready. The war had officially begun. The silence from my end was deafening, but the chaos on theirs was just beginning. Becky was not used to being told no. As Jamal's fiancée, she had grown accustomed to a lifestyle funded by money she never earned, and now that the tap had run dry, she was desperate. She blamed me entirely for ruining her perfect wedding plans and jeopardizing her future as a pampered housewife. So she decided to take matters into her own hands. 3 days after I cut them off, Becky did something incredibly foolish. She went looking for me at my job, or rather at the job she thought I had. For years, I had let my family believe I worked as a low-level data entry clerk at a generic staffing agency called Data Flow Solutions. It was a perfect cover, boring, unpretentious, and easy to dismiss. What they did not know was that Data Flow Solutions was a shell company I used for minor administrative tasks. The address listed on the old business cards I gave them actually belonged to the high-rise building where my real firm, KW Forensic Solutions, occupied the top 3 floors. At 10 in the morning on a Thursday, Becky stormed into the lobby of the Sterling Tower in downtown Atlanta. She was wearing her work uniform, a pristine white tunic from the luxury spa where she was an esthetician, but her face was twisted in a snarl that ruined the serene image. She marched up to the front desk, security, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "I need to see Keisha Williams," she demanded, slamming her hand on the counter. "She works for Dataflow. Tell her to get down here right now." The security guard, a man named Marcus, who had known me for 5 years, and whom I tipped generously every Christmas, looked at her calmly. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "I do not need an appointment," Becky shrieked. "I am her family, and I am here to report a crime. That woman is a thief. She has been stealing money from her own mother to fund her lifestyle. I want to speak to her boss. I want her fired today." Marcus blinked slowly. He knew exactly who I was. He knew I owned the firm upstairs. He knew I drove a Porsche he parked for me every morning. But he also knew how to handle a disturbance. "Ma'am, if you do not lower your voice, I will have to ask you to leave." Becky did not lower her voice. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started recording. "I am going live," she threatened. "I am going to tell everyone that this company employs a thief. Keisha Williams stole thousands of dollars from her elderly parents. She is a fraud." Upstairs in my corner office, I was watching the whole thing unfold on my monitor. Marcus had buzzed me the moment she walked in. "Ms. Williams, do you want me to send her up?" he had asked, his voice amused. "Absolutely not," I had replied. "Let her dig her own grave, Marcus. Just make sure the cameras get a good angle." I watched as Becky continued her tirade, screaming about how I had ruined her wedding and left my family destitute. She was making a spectacle of herself, accusing a senior partner of a multi-million-dollar firm of petty theft in the lobby of one of the most prestigious buildings in the city. It was pathetic, and it was perfect. Finally, Marcus had enough. He signaled to 2 other guards who stepped forward. "Ma'am, you are trespassing and creating a disturbance. You need to leave now. Do not touch me," Becky yelled, flailing her arms as they escorted her toward the revolving doors. "You are protecting a criminal. I will sue this whole building." They deposited her on the sidewalk where she stood for a moment, adjusting her disheveled uniform before stomping away, still shouting into her phone. I sat back in my chair, replaying the footage. She had wanted to get me fired. She had wanted to destroy my livelihood to force me back into submission. Instead, she had just handed me a weapon. I downloaded the security footage and saved it to a secure file. Then I did a quick search for the spa where Becky worked. Serenity Day Spa. High-end clientele, very focused on image and professionalism. I found the email address for the owner, a woman named Mrs. Sterling, who prided herself on the tranquility of her establishment. I drafted a short email. Subject: complaint regarding employee conduct. "Dear Mrs. Sterling," attached, "please find security footage of your employee Becky Miller creating a public disturbance in the lobby of the Sterling Tower this morning while wearing your company uniform. As a tenant of this building, I found her behavior threatening and unprofessional. I trust you will handle this matter appropriately." I attached the video and hit send. 2 hours later, my burner phone, which I had turned back on just to monitor the fallout, buzzed with a text from Jamal. It was not a plea for money this time. It was a picture of Becky crying in their living room, mascara running down her face. "You witch," the text read. "Becky just got suspended for 2 weeks without pay. Her boss said she embarrassed the brand. How did you do this? You are going to pay for this, Keisha. I swear on my life I am going to come find you and make you regret ever being born. You think you are safe, but you are not. Watch your back. I stared at the screen, the threat hanging in the air. He was threatening violence now. The financial pressure was squeezing him, and like a rat in a trap, he was lashing out. I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded the text to my lawyer. Then I opened my financial software. I had cut off their allowance, but I had not yet started to collect what was owed. It was time to change that. I pulled up the loan documents for Jamal's car, a flashy BMW he leased under my name 3 years ago, because his credit score was in the single digits. I had been making the payments automatically, another hidden subsidy to keep the peace. I canceled the auto pay. Then I called the leasing company. "This is Keisha Williams," I said, my voice calm and professional. "I would like to report the location of a vehicle for repossession. The payments have stopped and the primary driver has made threats of violence. I believe the asset is at risk." I gave them the address of my parents' house. It was time to take back everything. They wanted a war. They wanted to hurt me. But they forgot one thing. I was not just their sister or their daughter. I was the one who signed the checks. And the bank was officially closed. 30 days. That was all it took for the facade of their perfect life to crumble into dust. I had spent the last month watching from a distance as my family spiraled. I had seen the desperate social media posts from my mother claiming they were downsizing to simplify their lives. I had seen Jamal trying to sell his designer sneakers on Facebook Marketplace. But I knew the real reckoning was coming. On a cold January morning, exactly 30 days after I cut them off, the sheriff's deputy arrived at the Colonial Mansion in Buckhead. I wasn't there, but I had access to the security cameras I had installed years ago for their safety. Now, those cameras were my window into their downfall. The deputy walked up the driveway, a bright orange piece of paper in his hand. He taped it to the front door right over the festive wreath my mother had refused to take down after Christmas. It was an eviction notice. Notice to quit. 72 hours to vacate. Inside the house, chaos erupted. My father, who had been living in a state of denial, finally snapped. I watched on the living room camera as he stormed in from the porch, the orange paper clutched in his shaking hand. "Louise," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "What is this?" "The sheriff just posted an eviction notice. You told me you handled it. You said you spoke to Keisha." My mother was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, pretending everything was fine. She looked up, her face pale but defiant. "I did handle it, Gerald. Keisha is just being difficult. She will come around." "Come around?" My father threw the paper onto the coffee table. "We are being evicted in 3 days. And that is not all. I went to the bank this morning because my credit card was declined at the gas station. Do you know what they told me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled another document from his pocket and slammed it down next to the eviction notice. "They told me there is a second mortgage on this house, a loan for $50,000 taken out 6 months ago. In my name. I never signed for this." My mother flinched. "It was for Jamal," she whispered. "He had a sure thing. A crypto investment. It was going to double in a month. We were going to pay it back before you even knew. A sure thing." My father laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You forged my signature to gamble on internet money for our son who has never made an honest dollar in his life. And now, we are $50,000 in debt, and we are being kicked out of our home." Jamal walked into the room, then wearing sweatpants and eating cereal directly from the box. "What is all the yelling about? I am trying to focus on my business plan." "Your business plan just cost us the roof over our heads," my father shouted. "Get out. Get out of my sight before I do something I regret." The next 48 hours were a flurry of frantic packing. They didn't have money for movers, so they shoved their expensive clothes and knickknacks into garbage bags. My mother cried over her china collection. Jamal complained about lifting heavy boxes. Becky stood by the door, refusing to help because she didn't want to break a nail, blaming everyone but herself for their misfortune. They loaded everything they could into my father's old truck and Jamal's car, which I hadn't repossessed yet, because I wanted them to have a way to leave. They drove to my Aunt Sheila's house in Stone Mountain. Sheila was my father's sister, a kind woman with a small 3-bedroom house, and very little patience for nonsense. I gave them 2 days. On the second night, my phone buzzed with a notification from Sheila. Keisha baby. I tried. I really did. But your mother is trying to reorganize my kitchen and telling me my cooking is greasy. And Jamal is sleeping on my good couch, eating all my food and refusing to take out the trash. I told them they have to go. I love my brother, but I cannot live like this. I texted back, I understand, Auntie. Do what you have to do. An hour later, they were on the street again. This time, there was no family left to turn to. They had burned every bridge. They had alienated every friend. They ended up at the Starlight Motel, a rundown place off the highway where the neon sign flickered and the sheets were questionable at best. It cost $40 a night, and even that was a stretch for them now. I watched the GPS tracker on Jamal's car settle at the motel. It was a long fall from Buckhead. That night, huddled in a room that smelled of stale smoke and despair, my mother hatched her next plan. She didn't learn. She didn't reflect. She just plotted. I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture of my mother lying on the motel bed, clutching her chest, her face contorted in what was clearly a staged grimace of pain. The caption read, "Mom is having chest pains. She keeps calling your name. She says she is dying. Please, Keisha. She needs you." It was pathetic. It was transparent, but it was also dangerous. Because if I didn't respond, she would escalate. She would call an ambulance. She would create a scene that would drag me back into her orbit, whether I wanted to be there or not. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I called the front desk of the Starlight Motel. "This is room 104, I said, disguising my voice. "I think the woman in there is having a medical emergency. Please call 911. If she wanted to play sick, she could deal with the hospital bills." I was done playing nursemaid to her drama. But I knew this was just the opening move of a new game. She wasn't trying to get healthy. She was trying to get leverage. And a sick mother was the ultimate guilt trip. I sat in my penthouse looking out at the city lights. They were desperate. They were cornered. And they were coming for me with the only weapon they had left, my conscience. But what they didn't realize was that I had surgically removed it months ago, right along with their access to my bank account. Let them come. I was ready. The text message arrived at 3 in the morning, a single line designed to stop a daughter's heart. "Mom is in the ICU. Doctors say it is critical. She keeps asking for you." It was from Jamal. I stared at the glowing screen, my own heart refusing to skip a beat. I had anticipated this. The desperate move. The medical Hail Mary. My mother Louise loved drama almost as much as she loved spending other people's money, and nothing created drama quite like a deathbed scene. I did not rush. I did not panic. I showered, dressed in my sharpest business suit, and called my lawyer, David. "I need you at Grady Memorial Hospital in an hour," I told him. "Bring the paperwork. And stay out of sight until I signal." When I walked into the hospital room an hour later, the performance was already in full swing. My mother was propped up in bed, hooked up to a monitor that beeped rhythmically. She looked frail, her skin pale, though I suspected that was just a lack of her usual heavy makeup. Jamal was slumped in a chair by the window, his head in his hands, the picture of a grieving son. Becky stood by the bed, holding my mother's hand and looking appropriately somber. My father Gerald was nowhere to be seen, likely too ashamed or too exhausted to participate in another one of their schemes. "Keisha," my mother croaked, her voice weak and trembling. "You came. I knew you would come." I stood at the foot of the bed, keeping my distance. "What happened, Mom?" Her eyes fluttered closed. My heart, it just gave out. The stress, the eviction, it was too much. The doctors say I might not make it through the night without surgery, but there is no insurance, no money. She let out a sob that sounded more like a cough. I want to see my family whole again before I go. I want to know that Jamal will be okay." Jamal lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, do not talk like that. You are going to be fine. No, son, my mother whispered. I have failed you. I have failed everyone. But there is a way. Keisha. She reached out a trembling hand toward me. Keisha, baby. I know we have had our differences. I know I was hard on you, but this is my dying wish. Please, help your brother. Help him how I asked, my voice flat. There is an investment opportunity, she said, her strength seemingly returning for a moment. A business loan, $200,000, to open a chain of nail salons with Becky. It is a sure thing. If they get this, they will be set for life. I can die in peace, knowing my son is safe. She gestured to the bedside table where a thick document lay waiting. Just co-sign the loan, Keisha. Please, for me, for your dying mother. I picked up the document. It was a high-interest business loan application already filled out with Jamal as information. All it needed was a guarantor. Someone with assets. Someone with a credit score that wasn't in the dumpster. Me. Jamal stood up, walking over to me. Keisha, look, I know I messed up. I know I have been a jerk, but this is real. This is my chance to turn it all around. To be the man Mom always wanted me to be. If you do this, I swear I will pay you back every cent. I will make you proud. He was crying now, real tears, or at least a very convincing imitation. It was the performance of a lifetime. Then Becky leaned in close, too close. Her perfume was cloying, sweet and cheap. You know, she whispered, her voice low so my mother wouldn't hear. You owe them this. After all, you people are supposed to take care of your own right. Isn't that what you do? Stick together in the hood. The comment hung in the air, a subtle, razor-sharp jab of racism wrapped in a faux concern. It was meant to shame me, to trigger some deep-seated guilt about community and loyalty. It was disgusting. And it was exactly what I needed to hear, to know that they hadn't changed, not one bit. I looked at the document again. $200,000. It was enough to ruin me if I wasn't careful, enough to drag me back into their mess for decades. I pulled a pen from my purse. The room seemed to hold its breath. My mother, his eyes widened, a spark of triumph flashing behind the fake pain. Jamal stopped sniffing. Becky smirked. I brought the pen to the paper, hovering over the signature line. I could feel their anticipation, their greed radiating off them like heat. Then I stopped. I looked up at my mother, a small smile playing on my lips. Mom, I said, my voice gentle. I have some good news. What? What is it, baby? She asked, hope making her voice stronger. I just got a text from your doctor, I said, tapping my phone with my other hand. Dr. Patel. I have his number because, well, I audit this hospital. The color drained from her face for real this time. He says your heart is fine, Mom. In fact, he says your vitals are stronger than mine. The pain you are feeling, the reason you are here. I leaned in close, enjoying the look of pure terror in her eyes. It is gas, Mom, severe indigestion. Apparently you ate 3 large pizzas by yourself last night at the motel. That is a lot of cheese for a woman with a lactose intolerance. I dropped the pen on the floor. It clattered loudly in the silent room. So no, I won't be signing this loan. Because you are not dying. You are just full of hot air. And pizza. I turned to leave, signaling David, who stepped out from behind the curtain in the hallway, witnessing everything. The scream my mother let out was not one of pain. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. But I was already walking out the door, my heels clicking a rhythm of victory on the hospital tile. I walked out of Grady Memorial Hospital with the loan application still tucked under my arm. Most people would have thrown it in the trash, but I was a forensic accountant, and to me that document was not just a piece of paper, it was a crime scene. The sum was too specific. Was too $200,000 was a strange amount for a startup nail salon. It was a round number, yes, but startup costs usually required itemized breakdowns for equipment rent and licensing. This application was a desperate lump sum request. I sat in my car in the parking garage and pulled out my laptop. I connected to my secure hotspot and went to work. I had Jamal's social security number memorized from the years I spent filing his taxes when he was too lazy to do it himself. It took me less than 10 minutes to bypass the superficial credit checks and dive into the deep web of his financial footprint. What I found made my blood run cold. Jamal did not have a business plan. He had a gambling addiction. I traced a series of wire transfers from his account to a shell company called Vesta Holdings, based in the Cayman Islands. To the untrained eye, it looked like an investment firm. To me, it had all the hallmarks of an offshore sports betting syndicate. I dug deeper, running the EIN of the company against federal watch lists. It popped up immediately. Vesta Holdings was a front for an illegal bookmaking operation run by a man named Darius King, a notorious figure in the Atlanta underworld. The ledger was clear. Jamal had bet heavy on college football throughout the fall season, and he had lost. Badly. The principal debt was $150,000. The rest of the $200,000 he was asking for was likely the exorbitant interest loan sharks charged for not breaking your legs. I sat back in my leather seat and stared at the screen. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a sickening clarity. My mother's fake heart attack was not just a ploy for money, it was a ploy for survival. My parents knew. They knew Jamal was in debt to dangerous people. They knew his life was potentially on the line. And instead of facing the consequences or going to the police, they decided to serve me up as the sacrificial lamb. They were willing to destroy my credit, my finances, and my future to pay off a crime lord because they could not bear to see their golden child face the music. They valued his safety over my entire existence. I drove back to my office, my mind racing. I needed to document this. I needed to prepare for the fallout because debt collectors like Darius King did not just send angry letters, they sent messages. While I was securing my files, my burner phone buzzed. It was a notification from the GPS tracker I had left on Jamal's car before canceling the lease payments. The vehicle was moving. It was leaving the hospital and heading back to the Starlight Motel. But then I saw something else on the tracking app. A second signal. When I had set up the tracking, I had linked it to a perimeter alert. Another vehicle had been idling near the hospital for the last hour and was now following Jamal's BMW. It was a black SUV registered to a rental agency, a classic tactic for people who did not want to be found. I opened the audio feed from inside Jamal's car. I had installed the listening device years ago when my father complained about hearing a rattling noise in the engine and asked me to check it out. I had never removed it. The audio crackled to life. I could hear my mother sobbing in the back seat. "He is going to kill me." Jamal's voice was high-pitched and erratic. "King gave me until midnight tonight. He said if I did not have the cash, he was going to start taking fingers." "We will figure something out," Gerald, my father said, though he sounded defeated. "Maybe we can call your Aunt Sheila again." "She won to pick up," Jamal snapped. "Nobody will pick up." "Keisha was the only one with that kind of cash and she walked out. She walked out and left me to die." "You should have cried harder," Becky said from the passenger seat. "You did not look sad enough." I listened with a mixture of disgust and horror. They were not discussing how to protect themselves or go to the police. They were critiquing their performance. The car stopped. The GPS showed they were back at the Starlight Motel. I heard the car doors open. Then I heard another sound, the screech of tires on pavement, heavy doors slamming. "Well, look who it is," a deep voice boomed over the audio feed. I froze. "Please," Jamal whimpered. "I am getting the money, I swear." "You have been swearing for a month, Jamal," the deep voice said. "My boss is tired of promises, he wants his paper." I heard a scuffle, a thud, and my mother screaming. "Stop it, leave him alone," she shrieked. "He is a good boy." "Lady, shut up or you are next," the man growled. Then came the betrayal. The moment that severed whatever microscopic thread of loyalty I still held for my brother. "I do not have the money on me," Jamal yelled, his voice shaking. "But my sister does. She has it. She is holding it for me." There was a pause. "What sister?" the man asked. Keisha, Jamal blurted out. "Keisha Williams. She is a forensic accountant. She is rich. She manages all our family money. She has the 200 grand. She was supposed to give it to me tonight, but we got into a fight. She is holding my money hostage." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not just lying. He was painting a target on my back. He was telling armed criminals that I was the bank, that I was the reason they were not getting paid. "Is that right?" the man asked, his tone shifting from aggression to interest. "Where is this sister?" "She works in Midtown," Jamal said, desperate to save his own skin. "Sterling Tower. She drives a silver Porsche. She has the money. Go get it from her." "She owes me." I disconnected the audio feed, my hands trembling. He had given them my car, my office location. He had sold me out to save himself without a second of hesitation. I stood up and walked to the window of my office, looking down at the busy Atlanta streets. I was safe here for now. The building had armed security and biometric locks, but I had to leave eventually. My phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Williams," a voice said, smooth and menacing. "We have a mutual friend named Jamal. He seems to think you are holding something that belongs to us." I did not speak. I hit the record button on my office landline. "We are outside your building," the voice continued. "Nice Porsche. Shame if something happened to it. Or to you. We just want to talk. Why do not you come down, and we can settle your brother is debt." I hung up. I looked down at the street. Sure enough, a black SUV was double parked right next to my car. A man was leaning against the hood, staring up at the building. My family had not just abandoned me. They had not just stolen from me. They had declared war. They had sent wolves to my door to save themselves. I realized then that my physical safety was gone. As long as Jamal owed that money, I was the collateral. He had made me the collateral. I picked up my office phone and dialed my head of security. "Lock down the elevators," I said, my voice icy, "and call the police. We have a threat on the premises." Then I opened my laptop again. If Jamal wanted to involve me in his criminal life, I would oblige him. I would not pay his debt, but I would make sure he paid for his betrayal. I forwarded the entire file I had just compiled, the wire transfers, the betting logs, the connection to Vesta Holdings to the FBI tip line. Jamal wanted to play gangster. Let us see how he handled the feds. The police arrived within minutes of my call, sirens wailing and lights flashing, scattering the men outside my building like roaches when the lights turn on. They didn't catch them, of course. Men like that don't get caught waiting on the curb. But the message had been received. I was not an easy target. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a secure hotel suite under a corporate alias and hired a private security detail. 2 ex-military guards now stood outside my door, a grim reminder of how far my family had fallen. But defense wasn't enough. Jamal had escalated the conflict from financial abuse to physical endangerment. He had pointed a loaded gun at me and pulled the trigger, hoping the bullet would save him. It was time to return fire. I spent the next 48 hours building a trap. I knew Darius King's operation relied on intimidation and leverage. They wanted their money, and they didn't care where it came from. Jamal had convinced them I was the purse strings. I needed to convince them that Jamal was a liability. I used my forensic skills to trace the digital footprint of the men who had been outside my office. A license plate caught on a security camera led to a rental agency, which led to a prepaid credit card, which led to a burner phone number. It was tedious work, but I was motivated. Once I had the number, I sent a single anonymous text message. It wasn't a threat, it was a receipt. Attached was a screenshot of Jamal's bank statement, the one I still had access to, because he was too lazy to change his passwords. It showed a transfer of $5,000 to a luxury car rental service just 2 days ago. He hadn't used the money to pay his debts. He had used the last scraps of cash he could scrounge to rent a flashy car to impress a girl at a club. Along with the screenshot, I sent a GPS pin. It was the location of the Starlight Motel Room 104. The text read, "He has money. He's just spending it on himself. And he's right here." I wasn't proud of what I did, but I was done being the victim. If Jamal wanted to play in the big leagues of crime, he needed to learn the rules. Rule number 1, don't steal from the people who can break your legs. 3 hours later, my burner phone buzzed. It was a notification from the listening device in Jamal's car, which was parked right outside the motel room. The audio was muffled coming through the thin walls, but the sounds of violence were unmistakable. Shouting, crashing furniture, the sickening thud of fists on flesh, and Jamal's voice high and terrified, begging for mercy. "Please, I don't have it. My sister has it. She sent us the receipt." Jamal, a voice roared. "You rented a Benz while you owe us 6 figures. You think we're stupid?" I turned off the audio feed. I didn't need to hear the rest. I didn't want him dead. I just wanted him to understand consequences. The men left after 10 minutes. Jamal was alive, but he would be in a world of pain. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, my personal cell phone, the new number I thought was secure, rang. It was my mother. She had gotten the number from my old assistant, threatening to sue the poor girl for harassment if she didn't give it up. "You monster!" she screamed the moment I answered. "You did this. You sent those animals to beat your brother. He is in the hospital, Keisha. His jaw is wired shut. He has 3 broken ribs. How could you? He is your flesh and blood. He sent them to my office first." "Mom," I said, my voice cold. "He told them where I worked. He told them I had the money. He put a target on my back to save his own skin. I just redirected the package to the correct address." "You are heartless," she sobbed. "You are a cold, unfeeling robot. I don't know where I went wrong with you. You have all this money, all this power, and you use it to destroy your family. Well, guess what? You're going to pay. I'm not paying his debts, Mom. I'm not talking about his debts. I'm talking about your duty. I spoke to a lawyer this morning, a real lawyer, not one of your corporate shills. In Georgia, children have a legal obligation to support their destitute parents. It's called filial responsibility. You left us homeless. You left us starving. And you have millions. A judge is going to look at your bank account, and then look at your father sleeping in a motel, and he is going to make you pay." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You're going to sue me for being a bad daughter. I am going to sue you for support," she shrieked. "I am going to garnish your wages. I am going to take everything you have until you learn to respect your parents. See you in court, you ungrateful brat." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Filial responsibility laws. They were archaic, rarely enforced, but they existed. In some states, if a parent was indigent and the child had the means, the state could force the child to pay for their care. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary from a woman who had run out of options. But she wasn't bluffing. 2 days later, a process server walked into the lobby of my building. He didn't make a scene. He simply handed the security guard a thick envelope addressed to me. I opened it in my office. It was a summons. Plaintiff Louise and Gerald Williams, defendant Keisha Williams, cause of action, filial support and maintenance. She had actually done it. She was dragging me into family court to force me to bankroll her life. She was willing to put her own failure as a parent on public display just to get her hands on my money. I looked at the document feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. They thought this was their trump card. They thought the law would side with the poor abandoned parents against the wealthy, heartless daughter. They forgot one thing. I was a forensic accountant. I didn't just look at numbers. I looked at where they came from and where they went. And I had 5 years of receipts proving that my parents weren't indigent because of bad luck. They were broke because they had stolen from me, squandered their own income, and committed fraud. I picked up my phone and called David. "Get the team ready," I said. "My mother just sued me. She wants a fight." "Fine. I'm going to give her a war, and I'm going to audit every single penny she's ever touched." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, smelling of floor wax and old paper. My mother Louise sat at the plaintiff's table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She wore a faded cardigan I had never seen before, likely purchased from a thrift store, specifically for this performance to emphasize her destitution. Beside her sat her lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, whose cheap suit and nervous sweating suggested he was far out of his depth. My father Gerald sat behind them, looking at the floor, while Jamal glared at me from the back row, his face still bruised from his encounter with the loan sharks. I sat with David, my high-powered attorney, whose tailored suit cost more than Henderson's car. We had prepared meticulously. We had boxes of documents, bank statements, wire transfers, emails, and text messages. We were ready. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Reynolds, entered and called the court to order. She looked tired, as if she had seen too many family squabbles and had little patience for drama. Mr. Henderson stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we are here today to seek justice for two elderly parents who have been cruelly abandoned by their wealthy daughter. My client, Mrs. Louise Williams, is destitute. She is homeless, living in a motel, and suffering from severe health issues exacerbated by the stress inflicted upon her by the defendant, Ms. Keisha Williams. Under the filial responsibility statutes of this state, we ask that the court order Ms. Williams to provide monthly support to ensure her parents' basic needs are met." My mother let out a small, perfectly timed sob. "It is true, Your Honor," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We gave her everything. We sacrificed our own comfort to raise her. And now she lives in a penthouse while we sleep on dirty sheets. She even stole money from us, Your Honor. She tricked my husband into signing over control of our finances and then cut us off." Judge Reynolds looked at me over her glasses. "Is this true, Ms. Williams? Did you misappropriate funds from your parents?" David stood up smoothly. "Your Honor, my client has done nothing of the sort. In fact, the evidence will show that Ms. Williams has been the sole financial support for her parents for the past 5 years, despite their abuse and deceit. We have documentation to prove every penny." He handed a thick binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Mr. Henderson tried to object. "Your Honor, these are just numbers. They do not show the emotional abuse, the threats. The defendant told her own mother to die in the street." "That is a lie," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I never said that." My mother stood up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did. You said it when you walked out on Thanksgiving. You said we were dead to you. You broke my heart, Keisha. I carried you for 9 months, and this is how you repay me." The judge raised a hand, silencing her. "Mrs. Williams, sit down. Let me review the evidence." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Reynolds flipped through the binder. I watched her face, scanning for any reaction. The minutes stretched out agonizingly long. My mother kept sniffing loudly, casting pitiful glances at the judge. Finally, Judge Reynolds looked up. Her expression had changed. The tiredness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "Mr. Henderson, have you seen these documents?" she asked, holding up a spreadsheet. I have not." "Your Honor, my client assured me." "Your client assured you of a fairy tale," the judge snapped. "According to these bank records verified by forensic audit, Ms. Keisha Williams has transferred a total of $250,000 to her parents' accounts over the last 5 years. That includes mortgage payments, utility bills, car leases, and direct cash transfers." My mother went pale. "But that was for rent," she stammered. "We were renting the house from her." Judge Reynolds pulled out another document. "And here we have credit card statements in your name. Mrs. Williams paid off monthly by your daughter." Let us see what you were buying with this rent money. A Louis Vuitton handbag, $3,000. A weekend trip to Savannah, $2,000. A spa package for... She squinted at the paper. Becky Miller, $500. The judge looked at my mother with pure disgust. You claim to be destitute, yet you spent $500 on a facial while your daughter paid your electric bill. You claim she abandoned you, yet she bought you a car 6 months ago, which you then gifted to your son who has a suspended license. My mother was shaking now. That is not true. She doctored those papers. She is good with computers. These are certified bank records, Mrs. Williams, the judge said, her voice rising. Falsifying them would be a federal crime. Are you accusing the bank of fraud? No, I just... And regarding the allegation of emotional abuse, the judge continued, I see here transcripts of voicemails left by you and your son on the defendant's phone. Let me read one for the record. Keisha, you ugly, ungrateful witch, if you do not send money by noon, I am going to come to your office and make a scene. That was dated 3 days ago. The judge slammed the binder shut. This is not a case of filial neglect. This is a case of parental exploitation. You have used your daughter as a piggy bank, and when she finally set boundaries, you tried to use the court system to bully her back into submission. It is shameful. She turned to me. Ms. Williams, you have no legal obligation to support parents who have abused your generosity. The filial responsibility law requires that parents be indigent, due to circumstances beyond their control, not due to their own reckless spending and fraud. I hereby dismiss this case with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendant his legal fees. And Mrs. Williams, if I ever see you in my courtroom again, trying to weaponize the law against your daughter, I will hold you in contempt. Get out of my sight. My mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing for real this time. Mr. Henderson packed his briefcase in record time and fled the courtroom, not even looking at his clients. My father sat with his head in his hands, the shame radiating off him in waves. I stood up, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I had carried for years. It was over. The law had seen the truth. They could not touch me. I walked toward the exit, David beside me. As I passed the back row, Jamal stood up. He blocked my path, his eyes burning with hate. You think you won, he hissed. You think because some judge believes your fancy papers that you are safe. You are not safe, Keisha. You humiliated Mom. You ruined everything. I looked at him. I looked at the brother I had protected, the brother I had bailed out, the brother who had sold me to loan sharks. I did not ruin anything, Jamal, I said. You did. You spent money you did not have. You lied. You stole. And now you are facing the consequences. Get out of my way. He did not move. Instead, he leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. You are going to pay for this, he whispered. One way or another, you are going to pay. David stepped forward, interposing himself between us. Is that a threat, Mr. Williams? Because I can add it to the police report we are filing for the fraud investigation. Jamal sneered, but he stepped back. Enjoy your victory, sis. It won to last long. He turned and stormed out of the courtroom, leaving me standing there, shaking, but victorious. I had won the battle. But looking at the empty doorway, where my brother had disappeared, I knew the war was far from over. He was desperate. And desperate men do desperate things. I walked out into the sunlight, blinking against the glare. I was free. But as I got into my car and locked the doors, I checked the rearview mirror not just once, but 3 times. I had a feeling I would be looking over my shoulder for a long time. I had underestimated the depth of their desperation. Or perhaps I had simply overestimated their intelligence. After the courtroom defeat, I thought they would retreat, lick their wounds, and maybe, just maybe, try to find honest work. I was wrong. Like rats trapped in a flooding basement, they scrambled for higher ground, not caring who they stepped on to get there. 2 days after the judge dismissed my mother's lawsuit, I was sitting in my office reviewing the final details for the upcoming charity gala, when my phone buzzed with a low-priority alert from a credit monitoring service. It was a notification I hadn't seen in years. New inquiry rapid cash loans. Amount $50,000. Status pending approval. I frowned. I hadn't applied for a loan. My credit was impeccable, my assets liquid. I didn't need rapid cash. I clicked on the details. The application had been submitted online, using my social security number, my old address, the one at my parents' house, and my maiden name. Then another alert pinged. And another. Withdrawal. Alert savings account ending in 8821. Amount $10,000. Location First National Bank, Buckhead Branch. I stared at the screen. That account. It was an old savings account I had opened in college, a rainy day fund I had forgotten about when I moved my primary assets to a private wealth management firm. It still had about $12,000 in it, money I had saved from my first waitressing jobs. I had never closed it simply because I had lost the debit card years ago and never bothered to replace it. But someone had found a way in. I didn't call the bank to freeze it. Not yet. Instead, I opened the security app for my parents' house. I still had access to the cameras there, a little oversight they had never thought to correct. I rewound the footage to earlier that morning. There it was. Jamal and Becky creeping into the garage like thieves in the night. They were rummaging through the dusty boxes stacked against the wall, boxes labeled Keisha Childhood. My mother had thrown them out there years ago, complaining they took up too much space. Inside those boxes were old tax returns, my birth certificate, and apparently the paperwork for that old bank account. I watched as Jamal held up a piece of paper, shouting in excitement. He showed it to Becky, who squealed and hugged him. They had found the golden ticket. Or so they thought. Back in my office, I watched the bank alerts roll in. They were draining the account. They were applying for every predatory loan they could find using my identity. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. They were racking up felonies faster than they were racking up cash. My assistant Sarah walked in holding a stack of files. Keisha, the fraud department from First National is on line 1. They want to verify some unusual activity. Do you want me to transfer them? I looked at her, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. Tell them I am in a meeting, Sarah. Tell them not to decline the transactions yet. Tell them I will call them back in an hour. Sarah looked confused. But Keisha, if you don't stop it, they will empty the account. I know, I said, turning my chair to face the window. Let them. I needed this. I needed them to cross the line from family dispute to federal crime. The lawsuit had been a civil matter, easily dismissed, but ultimately just a slap on the wrist. This was prison time. This was leverage they could never talk their way out of. I watched the balance on the old savings account drop to zero. $12,000 gone in an hour. Then the loan approval came through. $50,000 deposited into a dummy account they had set up, likely using a fake ID. $62,000. That was the price of their freedom, and they had sold it for pennies on the dollar. I waited until the final transaction cleared. Then I picked up the phone. But I didn't call the bank. I called my contact at the FBI field office, a man named Agent Miller, who had worked with me on a corporate embezzlement case last year. Agent Miller, I said. I have a case for you. Identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud involving a sum over $50,000, and I have the perpetrators on video. I sent him the security footage from my parents' garage. I sent him the IP logs from the loan applications. And then I sent him the pièce de résistance. I logged into the bank's security portal. As a high-value client and a forensic accountant, I had privileges that allowed me to request immediate surveillance snapshots for fraud investigations. I pulled up the feed from the Buckhead Branch ATM where the withdrawal had been made. The image was crystal clear. Jamal wearing sunglasses indoors like a bad movie villain, stuffing cash into a duffel bag. Becky standing right next to him, laughing, pointing at the screen as if they had just won the lottery. They looked so happy, so triumphant. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought they had found a loophole, a way to steal my money without facing me. They had no idea they were starring in their own mugshots. I printed the photo. It was beautiful in a tragic sort of way. The greed was so naked, so undisguised. Got them, I whispered to the empty office. Sarah buzzed in again. Keisha, the bank is calling back. They say the account is overdrawn now. Transfer them, I said. When the fraud investigator came on the line, I didn't sound panicked. I sounded professional. I sounded like a woman who was closing a case. This is Keisha Williams, I said. I am confirming that the transactions on account 8821 were unauthorized. I am filing a formal affidavit of forgery and identity theft. I have already contacted federal authorities. Please preserve all video and digital evidence associated with these transactions. The suspects are Jamal Williams and Becky Miller. The investigator paused. Family members, ma'am. Yes, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Unfortunately, yes. I hung up the phone and looked at the photo of Jamal and Becky one last time. They were smiling. They were celebrating. They were probably planning how to spend my money right now, thinking about expensive dinners and designer clothes. They didn't know that the money they were holding was radioactive. Every dollar they spent was another link in the chain I was wrapping around them. The trap had snapped shut, and this time there would be no escape. No mother pleading for leniency. No father guilt-tripping me about family duty. This was the law. Cold, hard, and unforgiving, just like me. Jamal was not a smart man, but he was certainly a confident one. Flush with the $62,000 he had stolen from me, he decided to reinvest in his favorite asset himself. He spent $10,000 on a custom suit for him and a designer gown for Becky. He rented a limo, and he bought 4 VIP tickets to the Black Excellence Business Gala, the most prestigious networking event in Atlanta. The tickets were $5,000 each. $20,000 gone in a single swipe of a debit card tied to a fraudulent account. He thought he was buying access. He thought he was going to walk into that ballroom, charm some wealthy investors, and turn his stolen seed money into a legitimate empire. He dragged my parents along as props, dressed in their finest clothes, unaware that their outfits were paid for with a felony. I watched them arrive from the mezzanine level, hidden in the shadows. Jamal strutted into the ballroom like he owned the place, shaking hands with people he didn't know, flashing a smile that was all teeth and desperation. Becky clung to his arm, trying to look bored and expensive, but her eyes darted around nervously, assessing the competition. My parents looked uncomfortable, out of place among the city's true elite, but they played their parts, smiling when Jamal introduced them as the founders of his family business. It was pathetic, it was a performance, and the curtain was about to drop. Jamal zeroed in on a man standing near the bar. A distinguished-looking gentleman in a tuxedo sipping sparkling water. It was Mr. Sterling, a venture capitalist known for backing minority-owned startups. Jamal didn't know him, but I did. In fact, Mr. Sterling was one of my oldest clients. I had audited his firm 3 years ago and saved him millions. He owed me a favor, and tonight he was cashing it in. I watched as Jamal approached him, smooth and oily. "Mr. Sterling," he said, extending a hand. "Jamal Williams, CEO of JW Enterprises. I have been following your work. I have an opportunity in the luxury beauty sector that fits your portfolio perfectly." Mr. Sterling shook his hand, his expression polite but guarded. "Is that so, Mr. Williams? And what is your background in the beauty industry?" Jamal launched into his pitch, a rambling, incoherent mess about nail salons and crypto integration. He lied about his revenue. He lied about his assets. He lied about his experience. Mr. Sterling listened, nodding occasionally. "And your funding?" he asked. "Where is your capital coming from?" Jamal puffed out his chest. "Family money. We are self-funded. My sister manages the accounts, but I make the decisions. We are very liquid right now." Liquid. Stolen money was certainly liquid until the freeze order hit. "That is impressive," Mr. Sterling said, a small smile playing on his lips. "You must have a very talented sister." "Oh, she is just the bookkeeper," Jamal scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "She is good with numbers, but she lacks the vision. I am the visionary." I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. Even when he was stealing from me, he had to diminish me. He couldn't just take my money, he had to take my dignity too. Mr. Sterling checked his watch. Well, Mr. Williams, your vision is certainly unique. But I think the program is about to start. You might want to take your seat. The keynote speaker tonight is someone you should really listen to. Jamal grinned, thinking he had made a connection. Absolutely. Maybe we can talk numbers after the speech. We will see, Mr. Sterling said, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The lights dimmed. The chatter in the ballroom died down. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating a podium draped in velvet. The host, a famous news anchor, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 20th Annual Black Excellence Gala. Tonight we honor those who have built something from nothing, those who have faced adversity and risen above it. Our keynote speaker tonight is a woman who embodies resilience, intelligence, and integrity. She is the founder of one of the top forensic accounting firms in the Southeast. She has recovered millions in stolen assets for her clients, and she has done it all while remaining a ghost in an industry that loves the spotlight. My parents were clapping politely. Jamal was checking his phone, bored already. Becky was fixing her makeup. Please welcome the host, boomed the businesswoman of the year, Ms. Keisha Williams. The room erupted in applause. The spotlight swept across the room, searching. And then it landed on me. I stepped out from the shadows of the mezzanine. I was wearing a gown of deep emerald green silk tailored to perfection. My hair was styled in elegant waves, my makeup flawless. I didn't look like a data entry clerk. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like power. I walked down the grand staircase, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the marble steps. The crowd parted for me. I saw the moment my family saw me. My father dropped his program. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Becky froze, her compact mirror snapping shut. And Jamal. Jamal looked like he had seen a ghost. His jaw dropped, his eyes bulging. He stood up halfway, then sat back down as if his legs had given out. I walked past their table without even glancing at them. I ascended the stage and took my place at the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces, the hundreds of successful, powerful people who were waiting to hear what I had to say. And then I looked at table 12, the table where my family sat paralyzed by shock and fear. Thank you, I said, my voice amplified by the speakers filling the enormous room. It is an honor to be here. I paused, letting the silence stretch. They say success is the best revenge, I continued, but I disagree. I think success is the only option when survival is your starting point. I grew up in a house where value was determined by how much you could give, not who you were. I was the invisible daughter, the ATM machine, the one who kept the lights on while others took the credit. I saw my mother shrink in her seat, trying to make herself small. For years I let it happen, I said. I thought it was my duty. I thought love meant sacrifice. But then I realized something. You cannot save people who are determined to drown you to keep themselves afloat. A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. I built my company not because I wanted to be rich, but because I wanted to be free. I wanted to create a world where truth mattered, where numbers didn't lie even if people did. Forensic accounting is not just about math. It is about justice. It is about finding the truth hidden in the ledgers of deceit. I looked directly at Jamal. He was sweating now, wiping his forehead with a napkin. Some people think they can cheat the system, I said, my voice hardening. Some people think they can steal what they haven't earned. They think they can use family as a shield for their crimes, but the ledger always balances in the end. Fraud always leaves a footprint. And tonight I am here to tell you that no matter who you are, no matter who you are related to, if you steal, you will pay. The applause was thunderous. People were standing cheering. It was a powerful speech, a triumphant moment. But for 4 people in that room, it was a death sentence. I finished my speech and stepped back from the podium. As the applause continued, I saw movement at table 12. Jamal was standing up. He was pushing past his chair, his face twisted in a mask of fury and panic. He started running toward the stage. "Keisha!" He screamed, his voice cracking. "You liar! That is my money! You stole my spotlight!" He was unhinged. He was reckless. He was exactly where I wanted him. He reached the stairs to the stage. He put one foot on the bottom step, his hand reaching out as if to grab me, to drag me down to his level. But he never made it. Two large men in dark suits stepped out from the wings. My personal security detail. They didn't shout. They didn't make a scene. They simply blocked his path, a wall of muscle and stone. "Sir, you need to step back," one of them said, his voice low, but carrying a threat that even Jamal in his delirium could understand. "I am her brother," Jamal yelled, spitting as he spoke. "She owes me. That is my sister." "Not anymore," I said into the microphone, which was still live. The words echoed through the hall, a final public disownment. Security escorted him away, not roughly, but firmly, guiding him toward the exit. My parents and Becky scrambled to follow, heads down, humiliated, fleeing the scene of their son's public meltdown. I watched them go. I watched the doors close behind them, shutting them out of my world for good. Then I turned back to the audience, smiled, and accepted my award. The crystal trophy felt heavy in my hands, cool and solid. It was real. Unlike Jamal's business plan, unlike my mother's love, unlike the life they had tried to construct on a foundation of lies. This was real. And it was mine. The gala was over, but the night was far from finished. Outside in the parking lot, the crisp Atlanta air was thick with tension. My family was huddled near their rented limo, a pathetic tableau of defeat. Jamal was pacing, his suit rumpled, his hands shaking. Becky was sitting on the curb, her designer gown pooling on the asphalt, crying into her hands. My parents stood apart from them, looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. I watched from the balcony of the venue, hidden by the shadows. Beside me stood Chief Anderson, the head of the local FBI field office. He was a friend, a colleague, and tonight he was the hammer. "Are you sure about this, Keisha?" he asked quietly. "Once we execute the warrant, there is no going back. This is federal." I looked down at them. I looked at the brother who had sold me out. I looked at the sister-in-law who had mocked me. I looked at the parents who had enabled them every step of the way. "I am sure," I said. "Do it." Chief Anderson raised his radio. "All units move in." Suddenly, the parking lot was flooded with red and blue lights. Unmarked sedans screeched to a halt, blocking the exits. Uniformed officers and agents in FBI windbreakers swarmed the area. Jamal froze. For a second, I thought he might run. He looked around wildly, searching for an escape route that did not exist. Then two agents were on him, forcing him against the hood of the limo. "Jamal Williams, you are under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud," an agent shouted, his voice cutting through the night. "You have the right to remain silent." Jamal started screaming. No, this is a mistake. My sister said I could use the money. Tell them, Mom. Tell them Keisha said it was okay." My mother looked horrified. She took a step back, distancing herself from her son. "Jamal, I do not know what you are talking about." "You liar," Jamal shrieked as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "You told me to take it. You said she owed us." Becky was next. An agent pulled her up from the curb. "Becky Miller, you are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aiding and abetting identity theft." Becky's reaction was immediate and vicious. She turned on Jamal like a viper. "It was him," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at my brother. "He made me do it. He said it was his money. I did not know. I swear I did not know. Please do not arrest me. I have a reputation." "You spent $5,000 on a dress with a stolen credit card," the agent said, unimpressed. "Save it for the judge." They were dragged toward the waiting police cars, kicking and screaming. It was a spectacle, a public humiliation that matched the magnitude of their crimes. My parents stood frozen watching their golden child being shoved into the back of a cruiser. My father looked broken. His shoulders slumped. But my mother looked around and then she looked up. She saw me. She saw me standing on the balcony looking down at them like a judge from on high. She ran. She ran toward the building, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She pushed past a security guard who tried to stop her and ran up the external stairs to the balcony. Keisha! She gasped, reaching the top, her chest heaving. Keisha, stop them! You have to stop them! I turned to face her. I did not step back. I did not flinch. Stop them from what, Mom? Doing their jobs. They are arresting your brother, she cried, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. They are taking him away. You cannot let this happen. He is family. He is a criminal, I said, pulling my arm free. He stole $62,000 from me. He committed federal crimes. This isn't a family dispute anymore, Mom. This is the law. You can drop the charges, she begged, falling to her knees. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave him permission. Please, Keisha. I will do anything. I will apologize. I will sign whatever you want. Just save him. I looked down at her. This woman who had called me useless. This woman who had laughed when I was humiliated. Now she was on her knees begging for the son who had ruined us all. I cannot drop the charges, Mom, I said, my voice ice cold. I am not the one prosecuting him. The United States government is. Identity theft and wire fraud are not things you can just apologize away. Once he crossed state lines with that money, once he used the internet to process those loans, it became federal. It is out of my hands. But you started this. She hissed, her sorrow turning back into rage in an instant. You called them. You set him up. I did not set him up, I said. I just stopped protecting him. I stopped covering for his mistakes. He dug this hole, Mom. He and Becky grabbed the shovels and they dug until they hit rock bottom. I just turned on the light so everyone could see. She stared at me, hate burning in her eyes. I have no daughter. You are dead to me. I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. Good, I said. Because the daughter you thought you had, the one who would let you bleed her dry, she died a long time ago. The woman standing in front of you is someone else entirely, and she is done cleaning up your mess. I turned to Chief Anderson. Please escort Mrs. Williams off the property. She is trespassing. Anderson stepped forward, his hand on his holster, not threatening, but authoritative. Ma, it is time to go. My mother looked at him, then back at me. She opened her mouth to scream, to curse, to throw one last insult, but something in my face stopped her. She saw the wall I had built. She saw that there was no way through, no way over, and no way under. She stood up, dusting off her knees with a trembling hand. She tried to regain some dignity, smoothing her dress, lifting her chin, but her eyes were dead. I hope you rot, she whispered. I hope you learn, I replied. She turned and walked away down the stairs, past the police cars, past her husband who was weeping silently by the limo. She walked into the night alone. I watched the police cars drive away, their lights fading into the distance. Jamal and Becky were gone. They were facing 10 to 20 years in federal prison. Their lives as they knew them were over. I looked at my watch. It was midnight, the start of a new day. I turned to Anderson. Thank you, Chief. He nodded. Just doing my job, Keisha. You okay? I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air. It tasted like freedom. I am fine, I said. Better than fine. I am finished. I walked back into the empty ballroom where the cleaning crew was sweeping up the confetti from my celebration. I picked up my award from the table where I had left it. It caught the light sparkling like a diamond. I had lost a family tonight. But I had gained something much more valuable. I had gained myself. I walked out of the building to my car. As I drove home, I did not turn on the radio. I drove in silence, letting the quiet wash over me. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was not waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next betrayal. The slate was clean, the ledger was balanced, and the account was closed. 2 weeks after the arrest, the house on Sycamore Drive was quiet. The eviction notice had expired. The bank had taken possession. My parents were squatting in a cheap motel room paid for by pawning my mother's jewelry, but they couldn't let go. They were obsessed with the idea that they could somehow reclaim their lost kingdom. The foreclosure auction was scheduled for 9 in the morning on the steps of the county courthouse. It was a public event, a vulture's feast, where investors picked over the bones of failed dreams. I knew they would be there. My mother was too proud to admit defeat, and my father was too desperate to see reality. They thought maybe, just maybe, nobody would bid. They thought if the price stayed low enough, they could convince a hard moneylender to give them one last chance. It was delusional, but delusion was the only currency they had left. I arrived early, parked across the street in my Porsche with tinted windows. I watched them walk up the courthouse steps. They looked diminished. My mother wore sunglasses, trying to hide her swollen eyes, but her posture was slumped. My father walked with a shuffle, his suit wrinkled and ill-fitting. They stood on the periphery of the crowd, watching the auctioneer with a mix of hunger and fear. The auctioneer began the bidding. The starting price was $300,000. A steal for a property in that neighborhood, even with the second mortgage lien attached. $300,000, a man in a cowboy hat shouted. $310,000, a woman in a business suit countered. My parents watched, heads swiveling back and forth like spectators at a tennis match they couldn't afford to play. I saw my father reach for his phone, likely trying to call some predatory lender he had found on the internet. He was shaking his head. No one was going to lend to a man whose son was in federal custody and whose wife was a known fraudster. $350,000, the cowboy hat yelled. $375,000, the businesswoman said. The price was climbing. It was getting close to market value. My parents' shoulders sagged. Their hope was evaporating with every bid. Then a new voice entered the fray. It was a man standing near the back, wearing a plain gray suit and holding a phone to his ear. He looked like an accountant or a lawyer. He was calm, unobtrusive. $500,000, he said quietly. The crowd gasped. That was a jump, a big jump. The cowboy hat shook his head and stepped back. The businesswoman frowned, checked her notes, and folded her arms. It was an aggressive bid designed to clear the field. Going once, the auctioneer shouted. Going twice. Sold for $500,000 to the gentleman in the gray suit. My mother let out a small cry. She grabbed my father's arm as if she were about to faint. The house was gone. Their home, their symbol of status, their sanctuary of lies, was officially sold to a stranger. I watched as the man in the gray suit signed the paperwork. He didn't look happy or sad. He looked efficient. He was doing a job. My parents lingered, watching him. They were desperate. I could see the wheels turning in my mother's head. Maybe this new owner was an investor. Maybe he needed tenants. Maybe he would let them stay if they told him a sob story about their ungrateful daughter. They approached him as he was putting his pen away. "Excuse me, sir," my father said, trying to muster some of his old dignity. We are the former owners of that property." The man looked up, his expression neutral. "Yes, Mr. Williams. I know who you are." My mother stepped forward, removing her sunglasses to reveal her teary eyes. "Please, sir, we have nowhere to go. We have lived in that house for 20 years. If you are looking for renters, we are very quiet. We take good care of the property. We just had some family trouble, but we can pay. We can find the money." The man looked at them for a long moment. Then he glanced at his phone. "I am not looking for renters, Mrs. Williams," he said. "I am representing a client, a private holding company. They have specific plans for the property." "Plans?" my father asked, hope flickering again. "What kind of plans?" "My client has instructed me to expedite the eviction process," the man said. "The house needs to be vacated immediately. Any personal property left behind will be considered abandoned." My mother began to sob. "Please," she begged, "just give us a month, a week. We have heirlooms in there. We have memories." The man sighed. "Look, I am just the proxy. I don't make the decisions. But my client did say that if the former owners approached me, I should direct them to a meeting." "A meeting," my father asked. "With whom?" "With the new owner," the man said. "She is waiting at the property now. She wants to discuss the terms of your departure personally." My mother asked, her voice trembling. "Who is she?" The man didn't answer. He just gestured toward his car. "I can drive you there if you like, or you can meet us. But she is waiting, and she is not a patient woman." They got into their old truck and followed him. I pulled out behind them, keeping a safe distance. I knew exactly where they were going. They were going back to the house, back to the scene of the crime. When we arrived, the moving trucks were already there. A crew of men was carrying boxes out of the front door, stacking them on the lawn. My mother screamed as she got out of the truck. "What are you doing?" she yelled, running toward the movers. "Stop! Those are my things. That is my crystal. That is my grandmother's china." One of the movers ignored her, continuing to march toward the truck with a lamp. Another simply pointed toward the front door. "Boss is inside, lady. Talk to her." My parents ran up the steps. The front door was open. They burst into the foyer, expecting to find a stranger, a rich investor they could manipulate or beguile. Instead, they found me. I was standing in the center of the empty living room. The furniture was gone. The curtains were down. The walls were bare. It looked like a tomb. I was wearing my favorite suit, the one I wore when I closed a major audit. I held a clipboard in my hand. "Keisha," my father breathed. "What are you doing here? Where is the new owner?" I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. I tapped the clipboard with my pen. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad. Welcome to my house." "Your house," my mother whispered. "But," the man said, "a holding company bought it." "KSW Holdings LLC," I said. "Keisha Sarah Williams, that is me. I bought the house, Mom. I paid $500,000 cash, and now I own every brick, every board, and every memory in this place." My father staggered back, leaning against the wall for support. You bought our house. Why?" "To save us. To let us stay." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "To save you, no, Dad. I bought it because I wanted to make sure the eviction was handled correctly. I wanted to make sure there were no mistakes, no loopholes, no squatters' rights." I walked over to the fireplace where a single picture frame had been left on the mantel. It was a photo of the four of us taken 10 years ago. We were all smiling. It was a lie then, and it was a lie now. I picked up the frame and dropped it into the trash bag the movers had left. "The new owner wants to discuss the terms of your departure," the lawyer said. "Well, here are the terms." I pulled 2 pieces of paper from my clipboard. "You have 1 hour," I said. 1 hour to take whatever personal items you can fit in your truck. Anything left after 60 minutes goes to the dump. And I mean everything. The china, the clothes, the furniture, Jamala's participation trophies, all of it." My mother fell to her knees. "Keisha, please. You canna do this. This is our home. We raised you here. You raised a bank account here," I corrected her. "You raised a servant. This wasn't a home, Mom. It was a workplace. And you just got fired." I checked my watch. 59 minutes. "You better start packing. The dump trucks are on a tight schedule." They didn't move at first. They just stared at me as if I had grown a second head. They couldn't process it. The daughter they had called useless, the daughter they had tried to rob, now held the deed to their existence in her hand. Then my father started to cry. Not the angry tears of the courtroom, or the manipulative tears of the hospital. These were the tears of a broken man who finally understood that he had lost everything. He stood up shakily and walked over to my mother. "Come on, Louise," he said, his voice hollow. "Let's get the photo albums." I watched them scramble. I watched them fight over what to save. I watched them realize that a lifetime of accumulation meant nothing when you had nowhere to put it. It was the saddest thing I had ever seen, and it was the most satisfying. The hour was almost up. The movers had stripped the house bare, leaving only echoes and dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. My parents had managed to fill the bed of their truck with a chaotic assortment of items: clothes stuffed into trash bags, a few framed photos, a jewelry box my mother refused to let go of, and my father's golf clubs. It was a pathetic haul for a lifetime of accumulation, but it was all they had left. They stood in the center of the empty living room, looking small and defeated. The grand fireplace where my mother had once posed for Christmas cards now looked cold and imposing. The high ceilings seemed to mock their diminished status. I watched them from the doorway, feeling a strange sense of finality. This was it. The last act. My mother approached me, her steps slow and hesitant. She had lost the arrogant swagger that had defined her for as long as I could remember. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her makeup smudged. She looked like what she was, a woman who had gambled everything and lost. "Keisha," she said, her voice trembling. "Please. You cannot do this. Where are we supposed to go? We have no money, no credit, no friends." I looked at her unmoved. "You have each other," I said. "Is not that what you always told me?" "Family is everything," she flinched. "Do not use my words against me. I am your mother. I gave you life. Does that mean nothing to you?" "It means something," I acknowledged. "It means I'm standing here talking to you instead of having the police drag you out for trespassing, which frankly is more than you deserve after trying to steal my identity and send me to prison." She fell to her knees then, right there on the hardwood floor. It was a dramatic gesture, one she had probably seen in a movie, but the desperation behind it was real. She grabbed the hem of my jacket. "I will do anything," she sobbed. "Anything, Keisha. Let us stay. I will work for you. I will clean the house. I will cook. I will be your maid. Just please do not throw us out on the street. I am too old to be homeless. I cannot survive out there." I looked down at her. This woman who had once made me scrub the floors while she got a pedicure, this woman who had treated me like a servant in my own home, now she was begging for the job she had forced on me. "Get up, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "You are embarrassing yourself." She didn't move, she just clung tighter, weeping. "Gerald, say something," she wailed. "Tell her." My father stepped forward, wiping his eyes. He looked broken. His pride, that fragile thing he had protected so fiercely, was gone. "Keisha," he said, his voice cracking, We have nowhere else. I know we failed you. I know we were wrong. But please, have mercy. My reputation. If people find out we are homeless—" "Your reputation," I interrupted. "You are worried about your reputation. Dad, you are 65 years old. You are broke. Your son is in federal prison. Your wife is a fraudster. Your reputation is dead. It died the moment you let Jamal gamble away your future." He lowered his head, tears streaming down his face. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to provide." "You wanted to be seen as a provider," I corrected him. "You wanted the applause without the work. You let me pay your bills for 5 years and pretended it was you. That is not providing, Dad. That is pantomime." I pulled a small envelope from my pocket. My mother looked up, hope flaring in her eyes. Is that money?" "No," I said. "It is a key." I held it out. It was a single silver key attached to a plain plastic tag. "This is the key to apartment 4B at the Pine Street complex," I said. My father frowned. "Pine Street? Isn't that the projects?" "It is low-income housing." "Yes," I said. "It is a 1-bedroom unit. Ground floor. It has a stove, a fridge, and a locking door. It is clean. It is safe. And it is paid for." "Paid for?" my mother asked, slowly getting to her feet. "I paid the rent for 6 months," I said. "Utilities included. You have a roof over your heads for half a year. That is more time than you gave me when you kicked me out. That is more help than you gave me when I was struggling. 6 months, my mother whispered. And then what? Then you are on your own, I said. You figure it out, you get jobs, you apply for assistance, you learn how to budget, you do what I had to do, you survive. My mother stared at the key in my hand as if it were a poisonous snake. A one-bedroom, she spat. In the projects. We are the Williams family. We belong in Buckhead. We cannot live there. Those people. Those people are your neighbors now, Mom, I said, cutting her off. And frankly, most of them are more honest and hardworking than you have ever been. You should be grateful they will have you. She slapped my hand away. I want to take it. I want to go there. I would rather die. Then die, I said, dropping the key on the floor. It clattered loudly, echoing in the empty room. It is your choice. The shelter is down the street if you prefer. Or you can sleep in your truck. But you are not staying here. I checked my watch. Your hour is up. Get out. My father scrambled to pick up the key, his hands shaking. Louise, stop it, he hissed. We have to take it. We have no choice. My mother looked at him, then at me, then at the empty house that was no longer hers. The reality finally settled in. She wasn't the queen of the castle anymore. She was a tenant in the slums. And I was the landlord who had just evicted her. She straightened her spine, trying to summon one last shred of dignity. You are a cruel girl, Keisha, she said, her voice cold. You will regret this. God will punish you for how you treat your parents. God saw everything, Mom, I replied. He saw you steal. He saw you lie. He saw you abandon your child. I think he and I are cool. She turned and walked out the door, her head held high even as her world collapsed. My father followed, clutching the key like a lifeline. He paused at the door, looking back at me. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't say you were welcome, because it wasn't a gift. It was a severance package. I watched them get into their truck. I watched them drive away down the long driveway past the manicured lawns they used to claim were theirs. I watched until they turned the corner and disappeared. Then I closed the door, I locked it. I stood in the silence of the empty house. It was finally quiet. The drama was gone. The lies were gone. The leeches were gone. It was just me. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. This was the last kindness I would ever show them. They had 6 months to learn how to be adults. After that, they were on their own, just like I had been. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and freedom. I had won. But more importantly, I had survived. And now, I had a lot of work to do. I had a house to tear down and a legacy to build. And I wasn't going to waste another second on the past. 1 year had passed since the eviction, since the day I handed my parents the key to their new reality and walked away. 365 days of silence, of rebuilding, of finally breathing air that wasn't tainted by obligation and guilt. I stood on the sidewalk across from the old house on Sycamore Drive. It looked different now. The manicured lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling slightly. It looked like what it was, a shell, a monument to a life that had never really existed. But today, it was coming down. I adjusted my hard hat and nodded to the foreman. Do it, I said. The excavator roared to life, its metal arms swinging through the air like a pendulum of justice. It smashed into the roof, tearing through shingles and wood with a satisfying crunch. I watched as the master bedroom crumbled, the room where my mother had plotted her schemes and counted her stolen money. Then the living room fell, the space where I had been called useless, where I had been mocked and belittled. Brick by brick, board by board, the house was erased. It didn't feel like destruction. It felt like cleansing. While the dust settled, I thought about where everyone was now. Jamal was currently resident number 4921 at the federal penitentiary in Atlanta. He had taken a plea deal, 10 years for wire fraud and identity theft. I heard he was working in the prison laundry, making 12 cents an hour. It was the first honest job he had ever held. I didn't visit him. I didn't write. He was a stranger to me now, a cautionary tale about what happens when you believe the world owes you a living. Becky had vanished before the trial even started. She had testified against Jamal in exchange for immunity, then packed her bags and moved to Florida with a new boyfriend she met online. I heard she was working at a mall kiosk selling phone cases, a far cry from the nail salon empire she had envisioned, but at least she was earning her own money. I didn't wish her ill. I just didn't wish her anything at all. And my parents. I had kept my word. I paid the rent on the apartment for 6 months. On the day the lease was up, I stopped the payments. I didn't call to warn them. I didn't check in. I just let the contract expire. According to my Aunt Sheila, who still called me occasionally to update me on family gossip, they were still there. My father had found a job as a greeter at a big box store, standing on his feet for 8 hours a day, earning minimum wage. My mother was working part-time as a cashier at a grocery store, the very job she had once looked down on with such disdain. They lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they used to drive through with locked doors. They argued constantly, my aunt said. My father blamed my mother for spending all their money. My mother blamed my father for not standing up to me. They were miserable, bitter, and alone. But they were alive. They had a roof over their heads. And for the first time in their lives, they were paying their own way. It was a harsh lesson, but it was the only one that would ever stick. I turned my attention back to the demolition site. The house was almost gone now, just a pile of rubble and memories. In its place, I was building something new. The sign was already up. The Keisha Williams Center for Financial Independence. It wasn't a shelter. It was an incubator. A place where women from underserved communities could come to learn about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and investment. A place where they could get the tools they needed to build their own empires just like I had. I was funding it myself with the money I had saved from not supporting my family for the last year. It turns out, when you stop pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it, you accumulate wealth very quickly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a number I didn't recognize with a New York area code. Hello, this is Keisha. Ms. Williams, this is Sarah from Forbes magazine. We are finalizing our list for the 40 Under 40 issue this year. We would like to feature you. Your work in forensic accounting and your new philanthropic initiative has really caught our attention. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. That sounds wonderful, Sarah. I would be honored. We would like to send a photographer out next week, maybe get some shots of you at the new site. That works for me, I said. I will have my assistant send you the details. I hung up and looked at the pile of debris that used to be my prison. 40 Under 40. A center for women. A thriving business. A life that was entirely my own. I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner 1 year ago. I thought about my mother's laugh, her cruel question echoing in the silence. How does it feel to be useless, daughter? I wish she could see me now. Not so I could gloat. Not so I could rub it in her face. But just so she could see that she was wrong. I wasn't useless. I was just used. And once I stopped being used, I became unstoppable. I walked over to my car, my heels crunching on the gravel. I got in and started the engine. The radio was playing an upbeat song and the sun was shining through the windshield. People often ask me if I miss them. If I miss the family dinners, the holidays, the sense of belonging, and the honest answer is no. I don't miss the anxiety. I don't miss the manipulation. I don't miss the feeling of being small. I have a new family now. My friends, my colleagues, the women I mentor. People who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. People who celebrate my success instead of trying to steal it. I drove away from Sycamore Drive, leaving the dust and the ghosts behind me. I had a meeting with an architect in an hour to finalize the blueprints for the center. I had a lunch date with a handsome lawyer who treated me with respect. I had a life to live. They asked me how it felt to be useless. Now I have my answer. The only time you are truly useless is when you are trying to save people who do not want to be saved. When you are pouring your love and your resources into a black hole that will never be full, that is useless. That is a waste. But walking away, choosing yourself, building a life on your own terms, that isn't useless. That is freedom. And right now, I am too busy being happy to feel anything else. So if you are watching this and you feel stuck, if you feel like you are the ATM machine, the doormat, the scapegoat, if you feel like you are drowning to keep everyone else afloat, let go. Stop paying the rent. Stop answering the calls. Stop apologizing for your success. Walk out the door, get in your car, and drive. Because the only person you are obligated to save is yourself. And trust me, the view from the other side is spectacular. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family to save yourself, let me know in the comments. You are not alone, and you are not useless. You are just waiting for your moment to rise. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is to let them go. This is Keisha Williams signing off. And I have never felt better. Keisha's journey reveals a harsh truth: being a good daughter should never cost you your dignity or your future. We often confuse financial exploitation with familial duty, believing we must save our loved ones, even as they actively drown us. However, the most powerful act of self-love is realizing that your worth is not defined by your utility to others. You cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction. Walking away from toxic family isn't an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. Freedom begins the moment you stop funding the people who secretly pray for your failure. If you have ever had to choose your own peace over a toxic relationship, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about resilience and reclaiming your power.